The strongest force on a battlefield is almost never the largest army. It is the mind that refuses to act on impulse. History remembers the bold and the loud, the men who charged and shouted and threw themselves at the enemy. But again and again, when you look closely, history is not ruled by them. It is ruled by the disciplined. This is the story of a man who saved an entire civilization by doing the one thing everyone around him called weakness. He refused to fight. While his city screamed for blood and vengeance, he held still. And for that, for years, they called him a coward. By the time it was over, that same insult would become one of the highest honors in the Roman tongue. His name would echo for more than 2,000 years, taught to schoolchildren as a lesson in the rarest and most difficult kind of strength there is. The year is 218 before Christ. Rome is a rising power, master of all Italy, confident and hungry, certain that its legions are the finest fighting force the world has ever produced. And for the most part, they are right. But that certainty is about to meet something it has never seen before. Across the sea lay its great rival, the merchant empire of Carthage. A generation earlier, the two had already fought a long and bitter war for control of the Mediterranean, and Carthage had lost. It paid a crushing price. It surrendered its islands and it seethed. The peace between them was never really peace. It was only a held breath. And out of that wounded pride came a single commander whose mind would haunt Rome for an entire generation. His name was Hannibal. The son of a Carthaginian general, he had grown up in the shadow of that lost war, raised on the memory of it. The story goes that as a boy, his father led him to an altar and made him lay his hand upon the sacrifice and swear a solemn oath to be, for as long as he lived, an enemy of Rome. He would spend the rest of his life keeping that promise. When he was grown and given command, he did not wait to be attacked. He lit the fuse himself in Spain, and then he announced his war with the impossible. Instead of sailing across the sea, where Rome's navy waited, he chose to come over the mountains. He marched an entire army, tens of thousands of men, cavalry, and a column of war elephants over the frozen peaks of the Alps in the teeth of winter. The cold took thousands. The cliffs and the ambushing tribesmen took thousands more. Men and animals fell from the ice and were simply gone. But enough of them lived. And when the survivors came down out of the white mountains into the green valleys of northern Italy, they appeared exactly where no Roman had ever believed an army could come. The war was now on Rome's own soil, against a mind that always seemed 3 moves ahead of it. At the river Trebia, the first great Roman army marched out to throw the invader back into the mountains. But Hannibal was waiting. He lured the Romans out of their camp at dawn, cold and hungry, across the freezing chest-deep water. And then, when they were numb and exhausted, he sprang a hidden ambush from behind. The Roman army was shattered, and here already the pattern that would define the whole war revealed itself. Hannibal did not simply meet Rome's strength head-on. He used Rome's own aggression, its hunger to fight, as the very thing that destroyed it. Rome told itself it was a fluke. Bad ground, bad weather, a careless general. So it raised another army, larger and angrier than the last, and sent it marching after him. It was walking straight into an even worse catastrophe, and it had no idea. Then came Lake Trasimene. Hannibal found a narrow road that ran between the wooded hills and the water's edge, and in the darkness before dawn, he hid his entire army along the slopes above it. As the morning mist rose off the lake, the Roman column marched in, blind, strung out, and completely unaware. What followed was not a battle. It was a slaughter in the fog. The Romans never even formed a proper line. The consul leading them was killed where he stood. An entire army, some 15,000 men, was destroyed in a single morning, pinned between the hills and the water with nowhere to run. 2 Roman armies gone, 2 consuls dead or fleeing, and now the road to Rome itself lay open, with nothing of consequence standing between the city and the most dangerous man alive. In the span of a year, the invincible republic had been brought to the edge of ruin. Rome panicked. The city that had thought itself untouchable now braced for its own end, and in its terror, it reached for an ancient and dangerous emergency power, one it kept locked away and used only when the very survival of the state hung by a thread. The Senate appointed a dictator. For 6 months, one man would hold absolute command over Rome. The man they chose was Quintus Fabius Maximus. Older, deliberate, unhurried. Not the firebrand the frightened crowd was hoping for. And almost immediately, he did something that enraged the very people who had just begged him to save them. Everyone expected him to do the obvious thing. To gather a great army, march straight at Hannibal and avenge the dead in one glorious, decisive clash. The whole city was screaming for it. It was the expected move. It was the heroic move. It was exactly what Hannibal wanted him to do. Fabius refused. He had studied the disasters, every one of them, and he had seen the thread that ran through all of them. Every Roman army that had met Hannibal in open battle had been destroyed, every single one. The pattern was not bad luck. The pattern was the man. And so he reasoned his way to a conclusion that took more courage than any charge. To give Hannibal the open battle he wanted was not bravery. It was suicide dressed up as honor. The way to beat a genius, Fabius understood, was to refuse to play the game he was a genius at. His plan was simple and brutal in its patience. Never give Hannibal the pitched battle he craved. Shadow him across Italy step for step. Cut his supply lines. Burn the food in his path. Pick off his foragers and his stragglers. Deny him everything and let time and hunger do the killing. And he did exactly that. He kept his army on the high ground, on the ridges and the hills where Hannibal's feared cavalry could not reach them, always close enough to threaten, to loom, to limit where the enemy could go, never close enough to be drawn down into a fight. He became a shadow on the ridgeline that would not commit and would not leave. He burned the crops and emptied the villages in Hannibal's path, so the great army below could find nothing to eat. He turned every empty field, every poisoned well, every lost wagon into a weapon. It was war by subtraction. Hannibal tried everything to break that discipline. He paraded his troops in full view. He devastated the richest land in Italy in plain sight of the Roman camp. He all but dared Fabius to come down off the hills and fight like a man. And Fabius watched it all and did not move. But here is the cruel truth about discipline, the thing that makes it so rare. From the inside, it is wisdom. It is the hardest and clearest kind of strength. But from the outside, it looks exactly like fear. It looks like cowardice. And Rome was watching from the outside. The city seethed. They had buried fathers, brothers, and sons, and they wanted vengeance. Not a general who sat on a hilltop and watched while Italy burned beneath him. Their grief demanded action, any action, and Fabius, who could see exactly where action would lead them, would not give it to them. So they mocked him. They invented a nickname meant to wound, and it spread through the city and the army like a sickness. Dictator, the delayer, the old man too timid to fight. It followed him everywhere, spoken as a sneer, and Fabius bore it in silence. Hannibal, for his part, understood Roman politics better than most Romans did. As he burned his way across the countryside, he gave his soldiers careful and deliberate orders. Every farm and estate was to be destroyed, except one. The personal lands of Fabius Maximus were to be left perfectly, conspicuously untouched. It was a poisoned gift, and it was brilliant. The whispers started at once. Why would Hannibal spare the coward's lands unless the coward was something worse? A traitor, a man in secret league with the enemy. The mockery curdled into suspicion, and the suspicion spread. Even his own second in command turned against him. Minucius, the master of horse, was everything Fabius was not. Young, aggressive, hungry for glory. He called his commander a fraud and a coward, a man content to let Italy die so long as it protected his own reputation. And the people loved him for saying it. The pressure finally broke through. In an act almost without precedent in Roman history, the command was split in two. Half the army was taken from the dictator and handed to Minucius, so that the eager young officer could at last go and fight the war the crowd was so desperate to see. Minucius got exactly what he wanted. He marched his half of the army out onto open ground and threw it at Hannibal with all the confidence of a man who knew he was right. And Hannibal, who had been patiently waiting for precisely this kind of impatience, welcomed him in, and then closed a trap from hidden ground. Within minutes, it was Trebia again. It was Trasimene again. The young commander's army was surrounded and beginning to die in the open field, the exact disaster that Fabius had bled his own reputation to prevent, unfolding all over again because no one had been willing to wait. And then the delayer moved. Fabius, who owed Minucius nothing but contempt, who had been called a coward and a traitor to his face by this very man, gave the order at once. He marched his half of the army straight into the disaster to rescue the men who had betrayed and humiliated him. His fresh, disciplined ranks came down in good order and struck Hannibal's encircling troops from behind, and pried the trap open from the outside. And Hannibal, who would gladly destroy a reckless mob, was not willing to grind his veterans against a solid, ordered Roman line. He broke off and withdrew. The slaughter stopped. What happened next, no one expected. Minucius, the proud young officer who had spent months tearing his commander down, marched his rescued soldiers into Fabius's camp, laid down his divided command at the older man's feet, and called him father. For one clear moment, all of Rome understood what discipline had just done. It had saved the very people who mocked it. But understanding is fragile and pride is patient. Fabius's 6 months of absolute power came to an end, as the law demanded, and he stepped down without complaint and handed Rome back to its consuls and to its impatience. And the lesson, so dearly bought, began to fade almost the moment he was gone. Rome was still aching for one clean, decisive blow. One great battle to wipe away the shame of Trebia and Trasimene and end the war in an afternoon. And so, the very next year, freed from the cautious hand of the delayer, it decided to stop delaying and to gamble everything. 216 before Christ, Rome raised the largest army in its entire history, around 80,000 men, the flower of an entire generation, drawn from the city and its allies, gathered into one enormous host for one purpose: to find Hannibal, to fix him in place, and to crush him by sheer weight near a town in the south called Cannae. 2 consuls led that army, sharing supreme command and alternating it day by day. One of them, Paulus, was cautious and wanted to wait for better ground. The other, Varro, was eager and wanted to attack. And on the morning that the eager one held command, the great Roman host moved forward to give Hannibal the battle he had been praying for. Hannibal was badly outnumbered, perhaps 2 men against every 3 of his. So he did not try to match Rome's strength. He turned it into the trap that would kill it. He placed his weakest, least reliable troops in the very center of his line, and his hardened veterans hidden on the wings. The huge Roman center crashed into that weak middle and drove it backward, and the Carthaginian line bent and bent, but did not break. It curved inward like a bow, and the triumphant Romans pushed deeper and deeper into it, certain they were winning, packing themselves tighter with every step, walking straight into the closing jaws. Then Hannibal closed his hand. His veterans on the wings wheeled inward against the exposed Roman flanks. His cavalry, having already swept the Roman horsemen from the field, came thundering back and smashed into the legions from behind. In one terrible, perfect motion, the largest army Rome had ever fielded was completely surrounded. And then their own numbers became their executioner. Packed shoulder to shoulder, crushed inward from every side, the Romans could no longer raise their shields or swing their swords. There was no room to fight. There was no room to flee. There was only the slow, grinding press of the trap tightening. What followed was the bloodiest single-day Rome would ever know in all its long history. Tens of thousands of men killed in a matter of hours, not in a rout but in place, where they stood. The consul Paulus, who had counseled caution and been overruled, died in the press, refusing to run. When the sun set over Cannae, an entire generation of Roman manhood lay dead on a single field. To this day, more than 2,000 years later, it is still studied as one of the most complete and catastrophic defeats in all of military history. The impulsive war that Rome had demanded had very nearly ended Rome. The war that Fabius had begged them not to fight. The man they had mocked as a coward had been right about everything, and it had taken the worst disaster in their history to prove it. When the news reached Rome, the city did not riot. It did not surrender. Something in it simply went very, very quiet. And then, standing in the ashes of its own impatience, Rome finally did the thing it should have done all along. Quietly, painfully, and without ever quite admitting it out loud, it went back to the strategy it had mocked. The strategy of the delayer. No more grand battles. No more gambling the Republic on a single roll. And here Rome revealed the deepest source of its strength, the thing Hannibal had never accounted for. After the single worst defeat in its history, with the greatest general of the age camped victorious on its soil, Rome simply refused to accept that it had lost. It buried its dead. It raised new legions from boys and old men, and it waited. Patience, attrition, refusing the decisive battle, shadowing, harassing, and bleeding the enemy a little at a time, season after season, year after year, denying a genius the one thing he needed above all else, the great open battle where his genius could win the war. Hannibal kept winning fights, and he kept getting weaker. Because a brilliant general is still only one man, and Hannibal was alone. He had marched into Italy with an army he could not replace, deep in hostile country, hundreds of miles from any home. And across the sea, the jealous, short-sighted Senate of Carthage refused, again and again, to send him the reinforcements that would have won the war. They starved their own greatest weapon, out of envy and fear of his glory. And so the invincible Hannibal was slowly worn down to an ordinary man, trapped in a country he could not hold, beating Romans who simply would not break or surrender, watching his irreplaceable veterans grow gray and tired around him, with no road home. And while the great invader wandered and exhausted Italy, a new Roman mind was rising behind him. A young man named Scipio, who had survived the slaughter at Cannae as a teenager, and who had studied Hannibal the way a student studies a master. He understood the central, painful truth of the war. Hannibal could not be beaten in Italy, so Scipio refused to try. Instead, he took the war to the one place Hannibal could never afford to ignore. He gathered an army, carried it across the sea, and landed it in Africa, striking directly at the city of Carthage itself, threatening the enemy's home exactly as Hannibal had once threatened Rome's. And it worked. To save their own city, the panicked Carthaginians finally did the one thing that had eluded Rome for 15 long years. They recalled Hannibal from Italy. The greatest general of his age sailed home, still undefeated on the battlefield, and yet, in the largest sense, already beaten by an enemy that had simply outlasted him. 202 before Christ. On a dusty plain in Africa called Zama, the two greatest military minds of the age finally faced each other across open ground. But this time, the discipline, the cavalry, and the patient advantage all belonged to the Roman. And on that field, at long last, Hannibal was defeated. Rome had won the war, and it had won it in the end not with a single act of brilliance, but with the opposite. With an entire republic that had finally learned to refuse the brilliant, glorious, fatal stroke, and to win the slow, patient, disciplined way instead. Rome won by refusing to lose. Fabius did not live to see Zama. He died an old man the year before the final victory, having spent the last stretch of his life watching his hated, mocked, ridiculed strategy slowly save everything he loved. He never received the great triumph. He never got the glory or the parade. He only got to be right. And in the end, the name they had hurled at him as the cruelest of insults became one of the highest compliments in the entire Roman language. Dictator, the delayer, no longer the coward who would not fight. Now the one man who had the strength to wait when waiting was the hardest thing in the world to do. Centuries after his death, a great Roman poet wrote a single line about Fabius Maximus, a line that Roman schoolchildren would memorize for generations to come. One man by delaying restored the state, not one man by his sword, not one man by his courage in the charge, one man by delaying. So remember this the next time the whole world is screaming at you to act, to charge, to respond, to prove yourself right now today in front of everyone who is watching. Remember that the noise demanding immediate action almost always feels like courage, and it almost never is. Mastering your enemy is skill, but mastering your own impulse, holding the line when every voice around you and every voice inside you is demanding that you break it, that is the rarest and most powerful kind of strength there is. It is the strength that wins wars, and it is the strength that saves lives. Fabius understood that when no one around him would. He let them call him a coward. He let them call him a traitor. He let them strip away his command and hand it to a fool. He endured all of it in silence, and he saved Rome anyway, simply by refusing, day after day, to do the foolish thing that everyone demanded. Patience is not weakness. Restraint is not fear. And sometimes the single most powerful thing a person can do, whether on a battlefield or in an ordinary life, is to stand still, hold the line, and refuse to fight the battle they were never meant to win. That is discipline, and in the end, that is how it saves you.